Moving on a similar vein, to somebody who's well accustomed to mental health and dealing with mental health and is an expert in the area, is Professor David Horgan. He lives in the community, he works in Kew Towers, he's world-renowned key opinion leader in this circle. I've known David since my previous work in pharmaceuticals, and seeing him presented on a number of different stages. I'm now in real estate and totally different circle, but David is a highly decorated and well-educated individual who holds a lot of clout, not only here in Australia, but in and around the world, where people come from all over to come and hear him speak at different conferences. He's written many papers. He's the founder and director of the charity Australian Suicide Prevention Foundation, which he'll talk more about. He's a highly qualified clinical associate professor of the Department of Psychiatry at University of Melbourne, and he's committed to stopping the number one killer of Australians aged between 15 and 44, which is suicide. He established an Australian-wide free call telephone suicide prevention service in 1997, and it's the only entry under suicide in all 55 telephone directories, which is quite astounding when you consider that it's the number one killer between the ages of 15 and 44. He's also established the websites Youth Suicide, Suicide Prevention, After Suicide, and www.depression.com.au. So you can see his passion and interest in the area and commitment and vision to try and improve the stigma that goes with depression and suicide is second to none. So please welcome Professor David Horgan.
Okay, thank you all. And while you adjust to my accent, I've been here nearly 40 years. I'm told any week now I'll have it just right. Am I going forward or back? Yes, I hope it'll never happen to you, but it happens to somebody. So people think psychiatrists are a bit strange. So this is actually something written by a patient of mine who, when she's well, earns about $250,000, $500,000 a year writing ads. When she's unwell, she sits rocking in a corner with paralyzing anxiety and depression. So it's called care and maintenance of your psychiatrist. First, assume the psychiatrist knows absolutely nothing. This is not difficult when you consider that he has spent most of his first 30 years deeply immersed in books. And what was he reading about? Why, all the things that everyone else was out doing, of course. While the rest of us can claim a solid working knowledge of narcotics, group sex, etc., the hapless psychiatrist has only ever read about it in books written by people who spent all their time watching rats do it. You realize this person needs help, and you kindly agree to return each week. Okay, so now that I've established my qualifications, let's move. Yes, so yes, I have been working in Melbourne for a long time. I'm fundamentally now work in private practice as a sign of a misspent youth. And yes, I really now only treat severe depression and high suicide risk. Okay, so who gets depression? Well, take a list. Any of these people ring bells: Buzz Aldrin, Winston Churchill, Dr. House, Abraham Lincoln, Isaac Newton, Brad Pitt, all makes... So you're in good or bad company, depending. J.K. Rowling: I've never been remotely ashamed of having been depressed, never. What's there to be ashamed of? I went through a really rough time and I'm quite proud that I got out of that. Lady Gaga: I learned that my sadness never destroyed what was great about me. You just have to go back to that greatness, find that one little light that's left. So people with otherwise gifted lives, you would think, or charmed lives, nobody is immune. How does it all happen? I'm sorry this slide is so complex. It was one of the things we use for our flyers. But basically, it starts off with stress. Depression doesn't, or anxiety don't just happen. Life is going to have stresses for everybody, as Jane was saying, as Shane was saying. And then it depends on what makes you vulnerable. So what makes people vulnerable? If you're an anxious, worrying person, it's going to get you a bit more. If you're low self-esteem, low self-confidence, problem. Perfectionism, as Jane was saying, because people think that they have to be perfect when in fact we're all package deals. lack of assertiveness, where you have trouble saying no or trouble expressing your opinion. Poor relationships, so in fact good relationships are a major protection against getting anxiety or depression. Childhood abuse, emotional, sexual, physical, alcohol, drug abuse, and genes. You may have high IQ due to your family genes, you may also have vulnerabilities to anxiety, depression. So basically anxiety, depression, or emotional pain develop depending on the match between your vulnerability and your protection. People may develop self-harm thoughts, they may develop suicidal thoughts, and a number of people, of course, are going to die, as Jane was saying, unfortunately. And yes, we all advise young people drive safely. Don't know if you can also say, please look out for your levels of depression and stress. And the line we push in our suicide prevention organisation is, you would never advise a friend to die. So if someone told you they had a whole list of problems, no one of us here is going to say to that person, I think you should kill yourself. So if you wouldn't say it to somebody else, why would anybody say it to themselves? So tell yourself what you would tell a friend. The statistics bit, I hate statistics, but anyway, anxiety and depression, 25% of us all, adults, students, are going to get anxiety or depression. Women are more vulnerable for a whole range of reasons. They perhaps also get more positives emotionally out of life. Burning, cutting themselves, about 15% of adults not trying to harm themselves, but looking for a way to release the emotional pain. A recent survey showing even successful first-year medical students, 17% of them have a history of it. Thoughts of suicide, it's a spectrum ranging from a vague thought, if I was dead I wouldn't have this problem to deal with, to at the other end of the spectrum, a persuasive drive that persuades you that's the only logical solution. And then there are the rates of suicide and what we call completed suicide. Commonest cause of death in young people, not something the world knows generally. Everybody thinks it's car accidents and cancer. And it is preventable. Life does change. Painful conditions inevitably pass. And of course, what psychiatrists, psychologists do is we stop emotional pain. Okay, so what is depression? Everybody says, oh, I'm depressed about this, I'm depressed about that. What they mean is, I'm unhappy. It's normal when things go wrong to be unhappy. But the fundamental thing I suggest you think is, can you concentrate? Because people who are depressed can't concentrate. They read something, they have to reread it because it doesn't sink in. Or they're watching a TV program, they have no idea what's on. Whereas people who are unhappy can still concentrate, read. They may be upset, distressed about something, but it doesn't interfere with their thinking. And these are a range of other symptoms that people get: fatigue, trouble coping generally. A useful question to ask, are you okay, is useful, but the temptation is to say yes. A very useful thing to actually ask someone is, on a 0 to 10 scale, how okay are you? Because then that forces someone to actually not say I'm 10 out of 10. Nobody is 10 out of 10. But if they say I'm 1, I'm 3, I'm 5, it allows you then to actually explore that issue a bit more. And if someone does say it, and you are worried about them, a useful way of asking about suicide is, do you sometimes wish you did not wake up in the morning? And if they say yes to that, then you mean, do you actually wish you'd sleep through your problems, or you actually wish you were not alive? And that's the way we train medical students and psychiatrists in training to go down the spectrum of people having suicidal thoughts. Okay, interventions. If you are not feeling well, one of the things you might be interested in doing is going out to a thing called Mood Gym on the internet, run by Australian National University. It'll assess you and it'll tell you whether you've got anxiety, depression, and lack of assertiveness, whatever, and it will offer you free online modules of treatment. So make up an email address if you don't use your own email address, and then you can register and do it. There are a whole range of apps to help relaxation and sleep. There's depression.com.au, all these websites. Then there are counsellors, Headspace, etc., Youth Beyond Blue, GPs. they can give you medications. Some medications are very useful emotional painkillers. As depression gets more severe, your chemistry is going down, and they can intervene. Psychologists use talking therapies, highly skilled people often spend quite a long time training, and particularly use what we call CBT, where you try to use your logic to change the way you think. Psychiatrists, we actually are allowed to use medications because we are generally qualified doctors first. So it takes about 15 years to be a psychiatrist, but I think some people say it's because we're slow learners. Okay, so I've written a number of handouts, and if you just want to send me an email, I will just send you the whole batch of them. I've got 4 of them, basically. So one of the things is, instead of being anxious and worrying, try to problem solve. Try to think, okay, what are the options? And you might even write down some of the possible solutions so that when you find yourself worrying, you can consult your list. Practicing relaxation techniques. If you learn muscle relaxation, then your brain relaxes a bit to go with it. 100 times a day, take a deep breath, say relax, and then carry on, is trying to brainwash your brain into calming down, and so on. Perfectionism and it actually is an addiction to detail, and it's the reality is, would you pay someone extra money if you're employing them to actually go to the levels or the extreme lengths to which you go? So you might clean the house, but then would you pay someone, say, oh look, I'll pay you twice as much to dig under the carpet or whatever it is? Because we don't, while we would like a Rolls-Royce version of everything, the reality is we want 10 Fords. In terms of being assertive, don't say yes all the time. Say, let me think about it. And if I do something for you, yes, I will do it, but now you're going to owe me a favor. So, and ways of just changing the balance of power. The other thing is, tell people positives, because everybody needs to be told positives. And as Jane was emphasizing, you want to talk to people, and if people are going to argue, one of the useful things is say, let's keep our voices down, because if people start raising their voices, the vibes just become all about a battle rather than about the issue. Say, I feel 7 out of 10 about this, I feel 3 out of 10 about this, so you don't have to go on and on saying it. Yes, sometimes you may find yourself seeing a psychiatrist, psychologist, having therapy. One of the things they don't tell you is, number 1, you have the right to remain silent. Number 2, anything you say will be written down and may be used against you. Medication, basically depression is like diabetes. When it's mild, then self-help, like exercise and proper diet and diabetes. Well, in this case, cognitive therapy, practicing relaxation techniques, things like that, problem-solving techniques, all of those things will help. As the depression becomes either more resistant, more prolonged, whatever, then it's like having severe diabetes. No amount of self-help is really going to make a difference until your chemistry is reasonably under control. And that's what we try to do with medications. So there are various antidepressants around, all doing different things. And people say, oh, they may have sexual side effects, they may cause weight gain. There are 2 antidepressants, I'm telling you, Zyban and Valdoxan, which do not have side effects fundamentally, or certainly not those side effects. But you just have to pay for them. Preventing anxiety has been emphasized here. Have someone to talk to. Having someone to talk to, a friend, family member, GP, counsellor, whatever, allows issues to be dealt with early on. But there may be some insurance implications if you start going to see psychologists, psychiatrists early on in life. That is one of the things you need to think about. Exercise helps considerably. Keep your junk food intake down, because there is some correlation between that and depression, and learning assertion techniques, etc. What do I do to pass the time? I do things like this. So this young woman, 20 years of age, very high IQ, got a university entrance scholarship, but she'd already had depression for about 6 years. Had just spent 6 months in hospital, had every treatment known to man. The whole family was accepting she was going to die. So I see her, and her first question is, what are you going to do? You were a psychiatrist at 31. She was digging her nails into her limbs to stop the emotional pain. So what did I do? I wrecked my schedule, so to speak. I actually saw her every day for what I called therapy, what she called harassment. And at the same time pouring multiple drugs into her, which is what psychiatrists are allowed to do. So she recovers, after about 6 months, and decides she better take up one of her university scholarships. So I don't hear from her for 3 weeks, haven't been seeing her every day. So I say, why? Perhaps slightly barbed. The longer it goes without me hearing from you, the more concerned I get. I thought that was reasonably gentle. She thought about it for 30 seconds. Piss off. I'm enjoying my life. For your information, I was indeed having a good day before your text. I think I was hurt, but as I said, the case of wine from her parents solved that problem. Marijuana, as I say, don't shoot the messenger. So this came out last week just to brighten your lives up. So about 9% of people who try marijuana become addicted, but that's 17% who try it during adolescence. So nearly 20% of people who try it from adolescence. And if you smoke it daily, it goes up to about 50%. And you remain addicted for about 10 years. So you've lost 10 years of your life doing poorly in school or on the job or in your relationships. We don't want anyone to throw their life away like that. If you use it a lot, unfortunately, it does increase rates of depression and schizophrenia. So it's like anything else in moderation, maybe. But we think marijuana is now much more dangerous than we think. That's right. And finally, if you want some of these handouts, that's my email address, drdavidhorgan@gmail.com. Just say, please send me the handouts. I will email them back to you. What can you do? If you can, we want anybody who's got access to influential websites, would you please run links to us, to youthsuicide.com and suicideprevention.com.au. If you're into Google, you'll know that makes a difference to Google. Anybody who wants to gives us money, of course, that's welcome. Thank you very much.